Hi, I'm Dr. Rich Blana, host of the Healthy Stress Doctor podcast. In this, the 13th podcast, we're going to talk about rethinking the big picture. If you remember from last month, we talked about my 5 R's of coping model and how one of the R's, or one of the levels of defense, was called rethink, which really revolves around looking at your thoughts related to potential stressors. And in this month, we're going to talk about the first level of rethink, which is rethinking the big picture. And that's really based on examining your values and your thoughts about your values. And ACT calls this defining value directions. If you remember from our discussion of ACT and of values, a value is really a combination of a concept, a belief system, and really a pattern of behavior that you hold in the highest regard. And values are really your guiding principles in life. And if you're not clear about what you value, it can really be very stressful. It can be stressful because, number one, it makes goal setting harder. How are you going to set goals if you're really not sure what you value in life and what's really important to you? It can be stressful because it makes taking action more difficult. How are you going to commit to take action if you're not really sure about whether you value that action or not? And lastly, if you're unclear about your values, it can contribute to being stuck. And we talked about being stuck and having a lack of psychological flexibility. Think of values as really that motivational link for committed action, okay? And people really commit to coexisting with the pain and suffering in regard to moving forward in their life, because what they value, moving towards that value is more important to them than being comfortable and staying stuck. So that link to committed action is, you kind of ask yourself the question, is it worth coexisting with this pain that I'm about to take with me in the service of the value that I'm trying to serve? So if you have clear values, it makes coexisting with the discomfort that the thoughts and emotions around action create, because it's tied to something that's central to who you are, your values. Clarifying your values, or defining value directions as they call it in ACT, is really a 4-step process. And the first step is exploring your values. Exploring your values really involves organizing your values into categories. And there are 10 classic categories of values that ACT mentions. And just a couple that I could mention would be spirituality, work, family. Okay, those are examples of values categories. Then in each of those categories, there are specific things that you would value. So in other words, under family values, you might value being connected to people that will always be there for you when you need them, or you feeling that you want to provide that to your family members. So, under a category, there are different things that you value about it. And organizing your values into categories kind of helps you really see where they lie, and kind of sets up the next step, which is ranking your values. Not only having these categories, but ranking them in terms of their importance. So let's say you have 5 values categories that you identify with, and then you put them in order, and you see which ones are most important. And really, the most important values are really your core values. So if family, work, spirituality, say, come up as the top 3, those are your core values and really represent who you are as a person. And you can understand, therefore, if there's some conflict with those core values, it can be very stressful. So it's important to understand what you value to help you understand the stress associated with those values. For example, if you value honesty, all right, and you're put in a situation where you're asked to be dishonest. Let's say you work for a dishonest boss. That's really going to be potentially very stressful, because that's a core value that you have that's now in conflict. The next step in defining value directions is letting others know what you value, publicly affirming your values. And that really involves sharing what you value with other people. That really solidifies in your own mind that the value is in fact important to you. And I work with a lot of young people, a lot of college students who, for up until this point in their life, their values really reflect those of their family. And they're coming to grips with, do those values still represent who they are, or have they kind of changed and maybe no longer value some of those things that maybe their parents do at this point. And to kind of stand up and say, this is still important to me, it's still something that I value, or, I'm kind of diverging now, this isn't as important to me as it used to be. That's an important step in really clarifying values, because the values that you have to own them. You can't, adopt someone else's values and have them resonate for you unless they really are yours and you believe in them. And then that sets up the last stage, which is acting on your values. So again, if you can identify, this is who I am, these are my core values, then you can take that step to committed action, because you're acting according to what's most important to you and who you are. And one way to do that is to really set clear values-based goals. So in other words, the goals that you set are not someone else's goals, are not societal goals, but they're your goals based on your values. So the last step in defining value directions, and that's that link to committed action, is developing goals with measurable objectives that kind of give you a path to get to where you want to get to. And we're going to talk about how to set clear goals and measurable objectives in this month's newsletter. So if you haven't read the newsletter yet, you can go to my website, www.healthystressdoctor.com. That's all one word, Healthy Stress Doctor. And read the latest newsletter on how to set clear goals. I hope you enjoyed this month's podcast, and I look forward to working with you next month as we continue this discussion of rethinking the big picture.